Cami. Uh, so, Dr. Puccio, we'll have you start in just a second. I just wanted to let my Buffalo folks know that, and Gerard, we've talked about this, is that the course on creative problem solving in medical education is moving forward. It's going to be about a 9-session course. Gerard and the director of continuing education and I have been meeting on that. So, Charity, that might be something that you folks down at Kaleida might want to get involved in. And so we will. You're on the distribution list. We'll keep you posted on that, and we'll keep that moving forward. So, and just also on a personal note, want to let you guys know that just came on that my daughter did match, and she's going to the Medical University of South Carolina. So, and last but not least is the new book is out for beta reader review, right? And so we'll be getting that to you real soon too. So so very excited about that. So just so excited to see all of you here this morning. I believe everybody knows everybody. Is that right, Jerry? Okay, so with that being the case, this is a continuation of Dr. Puccio's work that we began last time we were together. And as you all experienced, you took the foresight instrument, and there was such great conversation around that. Gerard, thank you so much for coming back.
My pleasure.
Glad to have you. And so, and we're going to go a little bit more into depth about that whole concept around foresight and Gerard's research and work around that. So, Gerard, Dr. Puccio, welcome. Good to see you back in. Round of applause. Okay, good. And over to you, Gerard.
Well, thank you, Roger. Good to see everyone. As Roger mentioned, the previous workshop provided a review of foresight, your personal results, and we talked about the relationship between foresight and Nagma Khan's research into physician burnout in the emergency room setting. And it was such a delightful conversation that, and we ran out of time, folks expressed an interest in going a little deeper. So just to kind of level set in terms of topic, we're looking at foresight, which reveals your creative process mindset. And Roger's been at this for a long time. It never ceases to stop with regard to how far creative process goes in terms of its impact in different arenas in life. This is the reason why I'm in the field. When we start to think about creative process, it's a fundamental human experience. It's what defines and distinguishes our species. And so it is quite transdisciplinary. And I really appreciate what Roger has done. And I know, Robert, you've been a great proponent of looking at the intersection of creativity and its value it brings to medical education. One of the more recent areas in terms of directions that we've taken the research, which is what I want to focus on this morning, is how foresight ties into well-being. So my background is originally in psychology. My PhD is in organizational psychology. In some ways, this is a return to my roots. And there's just such a strong bond between understanding our creative mindset and how it can uplift, fortify, enhance our well-being, which was what came out of the research with the physicians in the ER space in the hospital in Atlanta that Dr. Khan, her research. And again, quick reminder, when we looked at that research and the variables in that research, foresight was a stronger predictor of burnout than job characteristics, which surprised me. So years in practice, hours worked per week, foresight mindset, clarifying, for example, and ideating were stronger predictors of those job characteristics, which sort of challenges some of our assumptions about how we experience stress. We often look immediately to the environment. It's what's happening. It's situational, right? It's a result of the environment. But what this research demonstrated was, yes, it is in part due to the environment, but it is our perception of, it's how we view the environment, it's the lens that we put over it, it's how we show up in that environment that really drives the degree to which we experience burnout. So I'm going to dive deeper into the foresight well-being connection. If you have your foresight profiles available and out, or you know your preferences, you'll find this more meaningful as I go through the results. Some quick reminders in terms of some critical concepts in this conversation. We're talking about how we respond to challenges, how we respond to complex problems or opportunities, and just to distinguish different levels of problems. There are routine problems that have set pathways and known solutions. You don't need to engage in creative thinking. You have complicated problems which have uncertain pathways and solutions need to be discovered. And then we're using the expression complex problems. Complex problems are situations where you have parallel complicated problems happening simultaneously. These are wicked problems. So as Roger knows, and his book is focused on, the challenge becomes how you understand the problem space and what are the issues within that problem space. How are they related? For complicated and complex problems, we need creativity. And so creativity is producing something new and valuable in response to complicated and complex problems. And of course, what Roger has been working on, and Raj, maybe this is a good time to jump in and talk about the certification that you're doing with continuing professional studies. One of the things that we know is that creative problem solving is one of the most effective programs for enhancing creative thinking. Meta-analytic study done in 2004, looking at 70-some training programs in creativity, not out of Buffalo, out of Oklahoma University, identified creative problem solving as one of the most effective training programs to enhance divergent thinking, to enhance problem solving, enhance creative performance. Raj, I know that ties into the certification that you're putting together. You want to mention that?
Well, I think just briefly that this has really kind of come from the work of Dr. Snyder, Dr. Sheehan, Dr. Gatewood, Dr. Mishra, and just with the whole thing of let's get some training in for our medical folks, not only our docs, but our folks from Collide and stuff as well. And I've seen just a real value, particularly in the area of problem identification. And Robert, that's what our article was for, that was published on the JAAPI, that took a look at the biopsychosocial aspect of medicine and then fusing that with the whole problem identification and creative problem solving. It's just a natural blend over, and it just makes so much sense in helping to deal with those ambiguous challenges that are faced in medicine right now. And Brenda, this is something that you and I spoke about several years ago, and so let's find a way to get you involved in this too. So, so that's where we're going with it, and it really just kind of sprung up from like, let's do something with this and let's get some skills out there, and then we'll do a certification around that, and we'll take it from there. And so, and Charity, this is just perfect for folks at Collider. So, yeah. So thanks, George.
Listening to your description, Roger, reminds me of some things that we know through our experiences and what is becoming evident through more recent research studies is that when you develop your creative thinking skills and your creative problem solving skills, you simultaneously are building resiliency and coping skills. As J.P. Guilford said, to live is to have problems, and to solve problems creatively leads to growth. I would also suggest that it leads to a stronger sense of self and a sense of being grounded rather than being tossed around by life's challenges. So that's sort of the big picture in terms of our conversation today. So a quick reminder, Foresight looks at 4 areas within the creative process. We're looking at how we progress through stages of cognition to move from an opportunity or challenge that presents itself to us through then clarifying what are the real issues to what we might do in response to those issues, ideating and using our imagination, to then developing the most promising solutions into robust workable solutions, and then thinking about how we can get those implemented successfully. And we use creative thinking all the way throughout. Creative thinking misnomer is it's only connected to ideation. It's not. We need to find interesting problems to work on and to look at problems in different ways. So we use imagination and creativity when it comes to clarifying, of course, when it comes to ideating. When it comes to developing, it helps us to ensure that we have a robust solution. And of course, often overlooked, it's not easy to sell change. We all know this. If we have a new insight, a new proposition, we want to challenge the status quo, we sometimes need to be highly imaginative in terms of how we get that implemented successfully. And perhaps bringing creativity into medical education requires some creative thinking and some playfulness. So quick reminder in terms of what happens in each step of the process. And I shared stories last time we were together with an example of someone who is highly creative in that area. Veronica Guerin, the newspaper journalist from Dublin, is a good example of someone who used creativity in clarifying. We're looking at reality, trying to understand the current circumstance. We're gathering information. The creative part is looking at what are the gaps, what are the problems, what are the issues, how do we reframe those, and then focusing on the right problem. John Cage, 20th century composer, was an example of a creative ideator, someone who's visionary, looks at the big picture, able to imagine new possibilities, is an idea machine, very fluent, divergent thinker, someone who's able to cross-fertilize, make connections between disciplines. We have Chris Rock as an example of a creative developer, someone who spends a lot of time honing their craft, looking at how they can perfect their ideas in terms of vocational connections, because Foresight has now been completed by over 200,000 people. We see a lot of engineers who are developers, so individuals who really focus in on making a robust, elaborate solution, which requires imagination, of course, as well. Dean Kamen, the inventor of Segway technology, our example of a creative implementer, someone who moves into action, who can bring novelty to life. So if you have your Foresight profile, this is a good time to pull it out and revisit it, or if you don't have it with you, to visualize it in your mind. So in your Foresight profile, you have a combination of peak preferences. Those are the, in this line graph, those are the points in the line graph that stand above that gray zone. And I know some completed Foresight after our session, and hopefully you got your feedback. If you didn't, let me know. I just went into my admin site and saw that all of the feedback had been sent out. But if you don't have it, and I know, Robert, I think you've done it now 3 times, and we should have sent you your most recent profile. If you didn't get those, let David know or Roger, and they'll tickle me, and then I'll resend that profile to you. But there are no right or wrong answers. It's understanding your ride through the creative process. And the example that you see here, you see someone who has a combination of high ideating and high implementing with a low preference for developing. It means you can't do it, but this is a watch out. This is a potential blind spot. You may skip over that. You may not give that the sufficient energy that it requires. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I'll share my profile with you all, give you a little bit of an insight into me. Okay, David, are you out there? I'm trying to find my, oh, I've got it, whiteboard. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you and my whiteboard. So this is what my profile looks like. And again, I'm sharing this with you just to help you revisit your own profile. So first line in this graph, or the first score in this graph, is my clarifier score, my ideator score. This is my developer score. This is my implementer score. So notice my lowest preference is ideating, and I'm a creativity professor. What? How can that be? Roger's like, what? I knew you were in the wrong job. Well, folks, this is the exact reason why I'm in the field of creativity. So back in 1981, when I was introduced to the field and took my first course, I was the sort of person who, when you had a problem, would immediately come up with a solution and pursue it. What more did you need to do? But what I learned through training was how to be a more effective divergent thinker. So my preference hasn't changed, but I would say my learned behavior has changed. So I can act like an ideator, and I can do that with, I would say, some facility. Roger, please nod your head. Yes, thank you. So this reinforces the value of training. So it enhances your repertoire and your range of skills. It doesn't necessarily change your preference. Like if, and I did this actually a few years ago, I'm a cyclist. I separated my right shoulder. I couldn't use my arm for a couple of months. While it was in the sling, I had to rely on my left hand. It didn't change my preference in terms of handedness, but I became more comfortable using my left hand. So mindedness is like handedness. My preference for ideating is still a low preference, but I've expanded my behavior because of what I've learned. My two highest preferences, again, looking at your profile, my two highest preferences are developing and implementing. So I am that person, yes. A number of years ago, fell in love with a refrigerator, this gorgeous stainless steel refrigerator. It was out on display. I bought it. I had it delivered to my home. And guess what? It didn't fit in the space. Now, someone who's a high clarifier, that would never happen to you. But for me, I fell in love with an idea and I pursued it vigorously. And we did eventually get it to fit by shaving off the bottom of the kitchen cabinet. So this, share that for a couple of reasons. One, these foresight preferences, while they have implications for our professional lives, certainly they have implications for our personal lives as well. And then the other reason why I wanted to share my profile with you is I'm going to draw in another line here. This was my doctoral supervisor, Reg Talbot. Notice his highest plot point was for ideating. His lowest plot points were for developing and implementing. Brilliant mind, had lots of ideas, but rarely followed through, and as a result had few publications, but had lots of ideas. And he was a great mentor, and he challenged me. And in fact, not sure you've ever worked with someone in this fashion who was so different in their approach and their thinking, that this gap here between our ideating preferences initially in our relationship, quite honestly, frustrated the hell out of me. Because he would say, hey, Gerard, go read Jones, 1981. I'd go read Jones. I'd come back and I would say, okay, I've got a new dissertation idea. And he'd say, wait, no, how about go read Smith, 1982. And I'd go off and come back. I've got another dissertation idea. I'm ready to go. And what he was doing, he was stretching me to really explore multiple options before committing to one, which was challenging for me. So I don't know if anyone's ever had that experience, or as you look at your foresight results. And in fact, I'll pause for a moment and see if anyone wants to jump in, because I think foresight has two major areas of implication. One is for personal self-management and self-leadership, but also because we problem solve with others, it impacts our communication and our collaboration with others as well. So I'll pause for a second so I'm not the only one sharing stories, and see if anyone else has any stories out there.
Looks like Archana is in on this. And then Robert. Yep.
Okay. Archana?
I can share. So when I first took the foresight, this was again 10 years ago, I was a high ideator, and that was sort of my sole preference. Now when I took it again, it's both ideator and implementer, so it became a driver. And I see that in sort of in activities. I know I used to always say I build these castles in the air, but don't have a foundation to put them on and really implement it. So I've seen that I've been more sort of willing to go ahead with those ideas. So
That's
definitely reflects on, even again talking about your professor and how I used to do a lot of things but ended up not publishing them, and that's something which hopefully now with a different foresight profile preference, maybe that'll change.
So Archana, I appreciate that's a great example of self-leadership, and perhaps the insights that you gained helped you to modify how you lead yourself, and also it reinforces teaming. So the punchline to the story about my supervisor, Reg, is that within the 5 years after I completed my dissertation, we had published twice as many referee journal articles together than he had in his 20 years prior to us meeting, because I would say, Reg, okay, that's an interesting idea, but let's finish this publication, right? Let's get this done, because I'm more of a developer and an implementer. Before I jump into the research on well-being, other foresight stories, again, just to bring this to life. Yeah, Robert?
Yeah, when I took it the first time, I was very high in ideator and implementer, and I paid no attention to clarifying or developing. And that's how I got my nickname Z. And I'm not sure that I'm any different now, but what happened is now when I'm doing things, I will think about that. I will say, I'm jumping too quickly from the ideation over to the implementation. I have to develop this a little bit more. So it's teaching me, it's not really changed me. Deep down, I'm still that Z, but it's impacting my actual actions.
Yeah, well, I would say that's a great description, Robert. And I would say it did change you. It may, as like I mentioned, handedness and mindedness. What it did change are what we refer to as meta skills, metacognition, and mindfulness. So that's stopping and pausing and understanding how you engage with the situation. That's a powerful change. That is such a great example.
Yeah, and it's actually been shown, because the second time I took the exam, I was an integrator, but I think I was answering the questions the way I thought they should be answered, not necessarily what I felt deep down. So
Yeah.
I actually was going to ask you, how valid is the second or third test, because you kind of know what the answers should be.
Yeah.
So I'm answering them as though, what they should be, rather than what I'm really thinking.
No, that's a great example. So the first time you complete it, because it's fresh and you don't know the mechanism behind it, that is likely to be a good reflection of your preferences. And, the validity research that we've done has demonstrated that. I would say, Robert, the challenge for you is you not only completed a second or third time, but you've done a lot of creativity training in between. So if you hadn't done any of that for the many years in between time, it still, could still be fresh. It's not surprising to come out as an integrator, because they're all important. And so there's probably that metacognition and mindfulness that's influencing how you interact with it, because the theory and it's valuable. So cool. So let me move forward, and then by all means, feel free to stop me at any point. I'm now going to get into the research on well-being. So again, this is one of those foresight relates to leadership preferences. We've done a study with 20,000 individuals looking at where they are in the organizational hierarchy. We've looked at occupational choice. One of the areas that gives me the greatest satisfaction is looking at the relationship between foresight and well-being, because it brings me back to some of my early education in psychology. So we published a paper few years back, 2019, Understanding the Interaction Between Well-Being and Creative Process, published it with 3 colleagues, Pam Zalay, Selçuk Acar, and Amber Boyer. These were the dimensions we were looking at, and I've asterisked 3 because I'm going to go a little deeper into those 3. So we looked at anxiety, we looked at obsessive compulsive disorder, we looked at perseverance, premeditation, sensation seeking, and urgency. These are all dimensions that give insight into personal well-being. We used established, publicly available self-report measures of each, and we correlated with a group of 196 individuals. We correlated their foresight results with these dimensions of well-being. And so you see a pretty strong correlation between premeditation and clarifying. And we'll go back to premeditation is that tendency to think before acting, which can enhance well-being, right? But if you get stuck premeditating and premeditating and premeditating, you never move forward. So it can go too far, and when it becomes rigid, it becomes an issue with respect to well-being. So not surprisingly, it correlated most strongly with clarifying, which is what we predicted. So individuals who have high preferences for clarifying will spend a lot of time thinking before acting. Now, remember the research when we got together last time, the scale that was the strongest predictor of burnout among the ER docs was clarifying. And so maybe in that environment, if you have a tendency to be high in clarifying, you need lots of time to think and think things over and reconsider and look at things differently and revisit. And you may not have that. You might have time pressure, and that might drive up burnout, or that degree to which one would report burnout in that ER environment, potentially, correlating or looking across these 2 measures. So again, this is not necessarily a drawback because premeditation can be valuable, but when it goes too far, when you become rigid, and Robert, this is the great thing, in fact, that you talked about, if you have that awareness, then you can ask yourself, oh, am I being stuck here? Do I need to move forward? Am I spending too much time here? I'm starting to emotionally wear myself down. It's time to move forward. So this cross-referencing these well-being dimensions with foresight gives us really insight into how we manage our emotions, potentially. Next, looking at ideating, sensation seeking, which, let's jump back to the definition. Sensation seeking is the search for intense and novel experiences. Think Ernest Hemingway. Think of those individuals who like adventure, who like to live on the edge. That's great. In fact, we know from research, openness to experience among the big 5 personality factors is the one most closely associated with creative performance. But also, if you take sensation seeking too far, it leads to things like addictions, like alcoholism, because you're always looking for that buzz. So these are quite serious dimensions in terms of well-being that we're looking at. And it, not surprisingly, and this is what we had hypothesized, tendency for high ideating, that being open, being willing to use your imagination, seeking novel experiences correlated in a rather significant way with sensation seeking. Now, again, it's not a bad thing, but it's an important thing to understand that there might be that tendency to have the potential to go too far. And again, coming back to what you said, Robert, then once we have that awareness is then how do we self-lead? How do we self-manage ourselves? Ideating also, one of the things that led us to do this research study is that a study back in 2011 used foresight and correlated it, looking at entrepreneurs, but included a measure of well-being and an ADD, ADHD measure. And they found that ADD and ADHD was significantly correlated with sensation seeking. And so that challenge in terms of focusing oneself, needing constant stimulation and movement and change, that attention deficit disorder, ADHD, is highly and meaningfully correlated with ideating, which I'll come back to that. Then just to show sort of the inverse relationship, implementing was negatively correlated with anxiety, and anxiety are feelings of worry or fear that interfere with daily activities. So in this negative relationship, and implementing was the only scale from Foresight mindset profile that correlated with anxiety, implementers are more likely to report low levels of worry, that they sort of damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Let's just do it. I'll worry about it later. I'm not going to worry about it at all. Now, again, that's useful information in terms of self-management, because there may be times, I mean, that's great. You put yourself out there, you make yourself vulnerable, you're willing to take risks. But I know from my experience, sometimes I leap a little too quickly, that maybe I should pause and not that I should worry, but that before moving forward should better consider the things that might happen. And this is why my life partner is a high clarifier and I'm a high implementer, because we really balance each other out. We make a great pair when we travel, because she plans for all of the things that could go wrong, and I plan for nothing that could go wrong. And thankfully, and there have been many occasions where I've said, do you have a thread and needle? Oh yeah, I do, on the trip. Do you have, do you have, I don't know, penicillin? Yeah, I have it. I'm just making stuff up. But there are many times where that happens because she premeditates and thinks things through, where on the other end of it, me worry, I kind of tend to leap in. So again, it's not that these correlations underscore issues, but they help to illuminate when we get stuck or rigid, how we need to better self-manage ourselves. And again, Robert, I'm going to lean on what you said earlier. That's the power of foresight. Self-awareness leads then to self-leadership. So what are some of the implications? And I'll open it up for discussion. What's the value of understanding how mindset ties into well-being? Well, from the research that Nagma Khan conducted, again, in the Children's Hospital in Atlanta, mindset is a profound predictor of stress. It's how we experience the situation. We can't always change the situation, but we can change our minds. We can change how we view or interact with that situation. And that's the power of the training that Roger is so good at delivering. So quickly, some implications: it expands our understanding of the emotional roller coaster relative to the creative process. So if I know I'm a physician who works in a circumstance that has a great deal of time pressure, is high-paced and chaotic, and I have a high clarifying preference, I need to recognize that I may not always be able to live out that preference, that the situation may have other demands on me, and as a result of that, that can exacerbate my sense of burnout. So what might I do about that? Well, you can learn tools such as the tools that Roger knows so well and are in his book, because when we have a tool, a cognitive tool, we can accelerate time. We can accelerate our thinking rather than being so sloppy with our thinking, if that makes sense. Understanding the relationship between creative process and mindset and emotions may improve our self-awareness and our self-leadership. We've already talked about this. Robert, you gave a great example of that. And of course, we know in psychology, our perceptions and our beliefs, our self-talk, really impacts how we experience a moment. It may promote an acceptance of the positive side of a diagnosis. I know this could be a bit radical, but rather than referring to someone, and I hear this all the time, that's my ADD, that's my ADHD. Why don't we say, well, that's my ideating preference? That's less pejorative. That's just my preference. rather than when we say ADD or ADHD, that has a pejorative judgment associated with it. And that kind of label can stick. So rather than saying I'm the victim of myself and my ADD or ADHD, you know, there are some positive things, because research has shown individuals with ADD, ADHD are also very good at divergent thinking. They're also very good at pursuing change. They're very good at experimenting with lots of things in life, which is what we refer to as an ideating preference. And I know, speaking from personal experience, my eldest son is high peak Mount Everest high ideator. He was diagnosed with ADD, ADHD before he went off to Fredonia State and was prescribed medication. And I said to him, Gabe, you know, this is good. This might help you to focus, and this is wonderful. But I also love the high ideating parts of your personality, and the fact that you're self-taught on the drums, you're self-taught bass player, you've experimented with lots of sports. He's played lacrosse, taekwondo, soccer, and he did all of these things before he was in 8th grade. And I knew he was an ideator before he took Foresight, because I could see how quick he was to change. And so again, I'm belaboring this a bit, but I think it's powerful because we so quickly get into labels, especially negative labels. And Foresight gives an opportunity to replace those negative, pejorative labels with potentially neutral labels. And then finally, it might shift language from negative self-talk and judgment to process glitch or temporary moment. My youngest son is a high clarifier, high implementer. Some years ago, we were traveling in the UK, in England, Manchester. I was revisiting my university, and he was going to fly over and join me, and was coming a few days later. Of course, my kids are steeped in these theories, and I see my cell phone ring, and it's Anthony, and I'm thinking he's supposed to be at the airport. He's supposed to be on the flight over. And I pick up the phone. Anthony, what's going on? He said, Dad, low clarifying moment. Just low clarifying moment. What do you mean? I'm at the airport and my passport is expired. So you see how you can use that language. So Robert, as you were talking about self-management, you can also use that to better manage a situation, and the language to diffuse frustration among people, because this is not a personality flaw. This was a moment where low clarifying happened, and we shifted immediately into, okay, what can we do? How can we solve this? And moved past judgment into problem solving. So that's what I've got for you. I'm going to stop there. I hope some of this resonates with you and you see the value in this. And again, I'll extend the invitation. Foresight is looking to go further with its research in the healthcare industry, and we're happy to make Foresight freely available. We'd love to replicate the burnout research. I know this is a major issue in the healthcare field, exacerbated by COVID, and Foresight, as one of the partners at Foresight and the head of research at Foresight, I will extend that open invitation, and if in case anyone's interested in doing research, not that you have to come forward now, but at any point, Roger knows how to contact me, and you know how to contact Roger. But with that, I'll open up for conversation. Does any of this resonate with you? Can you see the practicality? Archana, you got a big smile on your face.
This was something that when I first attended, again, a decade ago, that was what I wanted to do, because I could see it in myself that this was a great way to understand individuals in a way, and also for well-being. And I would love to use it with medical residents and medical students. I have sort of done some research on burnout and well-being, and I'm going to take you up on that.
Please do. Please do. Yeah.
That's a natural, Archie. That's natural. Dean has a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so okay, I'm not muted. All right.
Oh, we can hear you. Yeah,
I always have to check.
yeah, exactly.
So I'm really curious about um your comments about ADD, ADHD. I've fallen in since I moved to New York to helping a psychiatry practice. I'd never intended to do that again in my life, but at any rate, people that I see that ADD, ADHD thing, that's their mantra in life. And I'm just befuddled by that one. I'm also befuddled, and I liked how you depathologize it, because psychiatry has totally pathologized. Oh, I can't pronounce the word.
No.
Normal, I mean, within the diversity of human behavior, they've made things like that pathological, and it needs a drug, as if it were an infection and needed an antibiotic. The other one besides ADD that is big is anxiety. I have so much anxiety. Give me a pill for anxiety, but give me your read on how we can perceive anxiety, which I think is a huge burnout issue, as something non-pathological, to begin to then open that door to help people understand that it's not all bad, that there's a evolutionary purpose for that,
Exactly. That is so wise. That is such a great observation. And you're right. And I'm not going to try to say the word because you said it, and I'm not going to be able to repeat it. I'll stumble over it. But we label these things as a disability.
Right.
And there's an aspect to that. Right? It can get in the way if we become rigid or stuck in that space. It can get in the way with normal activity in daily life. However, we don't look at the polarity of things, because there's an evolutionary reason why we experience anxiety. It stops us from doing crazy things and potentially harming ourselves. But as my sign on the wall here that fell down says, most of the things that we worry about actually never happen. So that's a misapplication of imagination. So one of the things that we know through our approach is that we build resiliency because we enhance individuals' creative self-efficacy, their ability to better manage themselves. And again, coming back to what Robert shared, once I become more mindful of who I am, and I can use my metacognition to shift my own thinking. I'm not saying it's a panacea, so I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not saying that there isn't value to the medication, because there is some value. But I think two things. One, we can enhance our own resiliency by learning creative problem solving skills, because we have now tools that help us. And through practice, we can shift our own thinking. But also, I think, Dean, to your point, it isn't completely a pathology. We know from research, individuals with ADD and ADHD excel at divergent thinking. And divergent thinking is a strong predictor of creative performance. But it has to be balanced off with, for example, in the creative process, yes, I can ideate, but then eventually I have to develop and implement, right? So you learn how to do those things. So this is my personal passion, Dean, and you're nailing it, and maybe you're in a position to help advance that, and this theory and this tool and this framework and the training might give you some material to work with. I just your observation really is spot on.
Yeah, let's hope the pharmaceutical industry doesn't start to attack us, because we're threatening a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah. And I think there's nothing more dangerous when you have a toolbox with one tool.
Yeah.
I think you need multiple tools.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Right, I think Charity's up next, so.
Yeah, Charity?
Yeah, hi, thank you. So many thoughts have been going through my head. First, I just wanted to comment on your examples of your vacationing with your partner. I'm also a high implementer ideator. And so that anxiety link with clarifiers was so interesting to me because I think, you know, remembering years past when I would have to travel with my 3 little ones where it would force me to be a clarifier and pack the bags of Band-Aids and medications and everything. It was so stress inducing, which would not be normally, would be normal for me going on vacation. You know, pre-kids. So it's amazing
That's a
how
great
that
story. Yeah,
when you're
yeah.
forced into another area that's not your preference, I can immediately see the link with possible burnout.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And then the other comment was just that I serve on a system-wide caregiver wellness committee at Kaleida. Dr. James Harris is the co-lead on that. And we've been trying to promote to our leadership the idea of a chief wellness officer. So I am definitely going to put you in touch with Dr. Harris. And we would love to implement something like this, especially for our executive leadership team and then some of our physician leadership as well. I just think it would be so relevant and so useful.
Well, Charity, you reminded me of another area of my own scholarly interest, which is looking at evolution and creativity. And coming back to what Dean said about, you know, evolution has selected for and preserved things like anxiety. Why is that? But more broadly, human beings are creative problem solvers. That's what is special about our species. We're wired to be creative problem solvers. So creative problem solving is a survival skill. It's a survival skill. So therefore, it must connect to well-being.
Yes.
You know, we've retained that as a species. So wholeheartally support your efforts in that regard. Yeah.
Great. Thank
Robert,
you.
your digital hand may be getting tired there.
Oh, not at all. I enjoy hearing other, you know, like Charity's experience and Mishra's. So yeah, I have a couple of things. One is I'm full disclosure, I see a psychologist usually about once every 4 to 6 weeks. I've been seeing one for a long time just to know more about myself. And one of the things that I've learned over the years, but I'm still not very good at, is that thoughts lead to emotions. And some of the thoughts that you have are not real. They're just, you make them up in your mind. You think that's what maybe other people are thinking or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, the foresight sort of helps me think about that.
Robert, let me just jump on that very quickly. You're absolutely right. And that's why in our seminar and creative leadership course, the one I'm teaching actually right now this semester, we spend one evening talking about self-leadership. And self-leadership, the relationship there is self-awareness leads to self-leadership, which leads to leadership. What's in between self-awareness and self-leadership is recognizing our self-talk. And I suspect clarifying, ideating, developing, implementing, we have different self-talk that's going on in our heads. And so foresight gives a framework. What does a good theory do? It helps us to frame and understand. So by having foresight, it might help us to understand and tune into that self-talk that's happening, because you're exactly right. When we become aware of our self-talk, and there's that therapeutic experience where you say it out loud, and then you realize when you hear it out loud, how ungrounded that statement might be, for example. So there are therapy strategies that are directly designed to address what you referred to. I just wanted to reinforce what you said.
In your research, did you look at depression?
No, I haven't. No. What, you got a hunch?
Pardon me?
You have a hunch or a hypothesis or a
Oh, no,
curiosity?
I think there's a lot of depression, you know, in healthcare providers right now. They say 60% have burnout, so-called burnout. I'm not sure where the line is between burnout and actual psychological problems. In fact, they just published a large study for cardiologists, and 1 out of 4 cardiologists have a mental illness problem. Most of them are anxiety or depression. But yeah, I'm not sure where that line is.
Yeah.
Let's see. And so to make sure that I understand you, for those that had that were implementers, high in implementing, were they less likely to be anxious? So to me, that says that those individuals felt more in control, maybe. And maybe that's why. And I think some of the anxiety and depression that comes from healthcare providers is their loss of control. And you see that now because you've got residents and doctors now, and obviously nurses have for a long time, unionizing because they feel that they don't have any control. This is the only way they can, garnish some control over their lives and their work and their jobs.
Yeah, there's a personality trait that correlates with implementing from the adjective checklist. I think it's called aplomb. High implementers have aplomb. They feel really grounded and centered, so in control. That's another way to say that. And you're also making me realize I didn't then look at the flip of that, which is low implementing goes along with anxiety. And that may be the thing that is stopping people from moving forward, is that sense of anxiousness, right? Because it's a correlation.
Yeah. What one well, I don't want to if Dean, do you have a question? Because I have a question. Is there can creative problem solving and a systems approach to a problem, can they be complementary or not?
When you say a systems approach to creative problem solving and a systems approach, can they be complementary?
I would absolutely, Robert. And creative problem solving is a system. So yeah, and so the interrelationships, when we look at systems, I mean, creative problem solving will help you to diagnose where in the system stuff isn't working, in relationships. Yeah, I would say quite complementary, Robert. Yeah.
Because as Roger and I talked about this a lot. There's the 5 whys, there's the fishbone, there's all these other sort of system type
Gotcha.
problems. And creative problem solving is a separate one. I guess my question is there any way of integrating them more closely, or
without a doubt, and very quickly, and then let Dean jump in. But in our book, Creative Leadership, that's what we did. We went into what are the skills related to each step of the process, and what are all the tools that are available in trees, in systematic thinking, in decision making, in strategic planning, and how do they align? If you use creative problem solving as a meta model, so I'm sorry, I'm drawing in the air here. This is the meta model of creative problem solving. You can line up tools like 5 whys and other tools underneath that meta model. And then you can choose, if you know this is the skill you want to develop, you then choose the tool, no matter what toolbox it's in, you choose it to achieve that end. So without a doubt, in fact, we've tested that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Dean, I think your hand got so tired you dropped it, and we've got a couple minutes here.
Yeah, I just was going to add because the again, another pathological expression of depression, that there's other meanings to it. I mean, it fits right into this discussion of a need to reframe that it's an evolution. It's been around since the beginning of Adam and Eve, I think. But how do we look at it as a protective defense that is communicating something to the individual as well as to others around them?
Right. Yeah, good point. Well, this has been a delight. Thank you, everybody.
Robert's going to try to get one more thing in, and then we'll talk about our next meeting. Go ahead, Z.
So, when we talk to other doctors, healthcare providers about foresight, if we use the word foresight, it doesn't mean anything. Can you just give us like a sentence or two that describes foresight so that we can actually, make it more logical to them, I guess.
So yeah, I tend to well, first of all, I would love it if foresight became part of the vernacular. So that would be a lovely thing. So we can, why do we have terminology? It's to speed up understanding. So it'd be nice to be able to do that. And of course, foresight is a play on evolution. We have 3 responses that we always talk about: freeze, flight, and fight. But we also have foresight. So foresight is also a play on words in terms of using our creative problem solving as foresight, F-O-R-E, sight, to better respond to situations. But that's a lot. That's a lot of words, but we haven't chatted about that. It's one of the reasons, besides the fact that there are 4 preferences, why we call it foresight. But I talk about creative process, I talk about creative mindset, I talk about creative thinking, that these are innate in all human beings, and these are survival skills, and better understanding and leveraging that's the key. So Robert, to stay away from foresight, because that is not universally understood. That's how I would approach it.
Beautiful. Yeah. And to Brenda's comment, this also relates to fostering growth. Absolutely. So, Gerard, thank you once again for coming back a second time. It's just absolutely incredible. It's like listening to beautiful music. I love it. I'm looking at April 20th for our next meeting of the BSCME, and I'm thinking on April 20th, if it's okay with you folks, I'll talk about the new book. Sound good? Thumbs up. Okay, great. So, Gerard, thank you once again.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
And by all means, take Gerard up on his offer to do the research around this. This is a wonderful opportunity in all different areas. And as we know, creative problem solving and all this stuff is so important in the medical field right now. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful month. You know how to reach us. And there's Gerard's email. Have a great one, everybody. And Dean, enjoy New York. It looks like you got some sun down there. Go ahead, Dean. Yes, yeah. Dean, you're muted. You're muted, Dean.
The other group that needs to learn it is the people in banking, because they're in deep shit.
Are they ever? Yeah.
So true.
So true.